The Supreme Court is closing out their session with a couple of rulings that are just awesome for democracy. We talked earlier this week about them picking up a couple different provisions of Arizona state law that had limited people's ability to, like get a little bit wrong about their ballot or potentially have someone else be involved in handing it in. We'll give you more details. That decision has now come down. 6-3, the Supreme Court is upholding the suppressive Arizona voting laws. That's awesome. It was the court's first consideration of how a crucial part of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 applies to voting restrictions that have a disproportionate impact on members of minority groups. The larger message of the ruling was that the Voting Rights Act, hobbled after the Supreme Court in 2013 effectively struck down its central provision, retains only limited power to combat voting restrictions said to disproportionately affect minority voters' access to the polls. This particular case, Brnovich versus the DNC, concerned two kinds of voting restrictions. One required election officials to discard ballots cast at the wrong precinct. Why? Because those people are not citizens or whatever? No, because it's just convenient to be able to get rid of them at that point. The other made it a crime for campaign workers, community activists, and most other people to collect ballots for delivery to polling places, a practice critics call ballot harvesting. The law made exceptions for family members, caregivers, and election officials. The people who are challenging the law say that both of these provisions disproportionately impact voters who aren't white, and that is not even really disputed by the Supreme Court. But what do you know? The super majority of conservatives on there don't seem that aggrieved by it. They don't seem to mind it so much. So Adrienne, take it away. How do you like your Supreme Court?
Oh, you know what? They're doing exactly what they're intended to do, which is really to suppress the vote and to continue to uphold the power structures. We have a majority conservative Supreme Court, and unless we expand it or do something, we're going to continue to see rulings like this. We've seen voting rights completely be under attack within this last year because, hey, people in power don't want to lose their power, predominantly white men. And so as a result of that, what they're doing is suppressing the vote of people of color, of women, of people who are in marginalized positions in society and have more hurdles to get their vote counted. And it really says to the fact that we are not a democracy, or to the extent we are a democracy exactly as it was intended to be originally, where it's white male landowners who have a right to vote and who have a say in this country.
Yeah, and I mean, we know why they initially passed them. We know why they chose these Supreme Court justices. We know why the justices are ruling in this way. It is all designed to produce an outcome, which is, I'm not gonna say like a thing that biases the system towards electing Republicans that's out of step with their actual approval out there, amongst the populace. It's just yet another one of those things. Let's just make it worse, but that's what they're doing. Back in 2016, Black, Latino, and Native American voters were about twice as likely to cast ballots in the wrong precinct as were white voters. And by the way, if you're a white conservative, bear in mind, they're totally cool with throwing out some of your ballots too. They don't give a damn about you so long as there's way more not yous that are being thrown out. So it's like when they'll go into an area and they'll make it so you need voter ID, but not like college ID. That doesn't do it. They know that they're gonna disenfranchise some young Republicans, those sad sacks. So they just know that they're gonna disenfranchise more not young Republicans. So you should be offended by this. You won't be, because I don't think you fundamentally care that much about democracy, but in theory you could be. At this point, I wanna ask you one other question, Adrienne, because there's other details about this, but my fear is that this is bad on its own, but it's also a signal that we're ending 6 months of multiple states trying to crack down on voting in as many ways as possible. Huge substantive ones, incredibly petty ones, everything they can do. This seems like a Supreme Court that is gonna be pretty deferential to these states' efforts to do this, especially when in this decision, they say that they don't even necessarily need to prove that it's done to combat voter fraud. They can just be scared of it whether it's happening or not, and they can do whatever they want effectively. I feel like they're gonna uphold a lot of these laws that are being challenged. Some already have been. The DOJ is gonna be looking to Georgia, but what's the point if the Supreme Court is just gonna uphold it anyway?
Exactly, and this is just signaled it's an invitation to states to continue to promulgate these voting restrictions to essentially suppress the vote of marginalized groups so that white male dominance can continue to reign in our legislative process. And it's very unfortunate that this is the route SCOTUS is going. Also, it's like having this conservative bench up there with those 6 justices who really continue to push the Republican agenda. It is going to shape significantly really the demographics, the vote, the culture, everything about our nation. And so as much as people may think, oh, this decision doesn't affect me, as you kind of just indicated, the reality is that it's going to affect you down the line in your future. And so anybody who has any kind of democratic principles or progressive ideologies, they need to continue to fight, because what happens to us as Black people, as women, it will happen to you. We are the canaries in the coal mine. So when we scream about it, there's only a matter of time before it impacts you. So you might as well speak up now before it gets to that point.
You're 100% right. Yeah, and I mean, there's a reason they're doing it in the states they're doing it. They want to take those narrow victories that Biden had, flip those. They know that they're not gonna become more popular, like get more voters to support them. They just wanna make it so it doesn't matter. And if they can do that, and if they can win the Electoral College that way, well, then they haven't changed the laws in California or New York or whatever, but your vote no longer really counts if you can't win elections, because they've so manipulated and rigged the system in some states. So everyone should be engaged in this fight.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.